Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whoever you are, wherever you are, whenever it is for you. For me, it is just past midnight on Thursday, the 22nd of May, which makes this the news for Wednesday, May 21st, day 1183 of Vladimir Putin's war of aggression against the people of Ukraine. How do you do? I'm Peter Alexievich, coming to you live at 5 from this major European capital currently under siege. I see the peeps are coming in. Hey, Hobo. Hey, G2. Hey, PH. Hey, Anthony, Tommy, Tom. Greetings, Holly. How you doing tonight? Hey, Bobby. Bobby. What's up? What's up? Hey, Chef Deb. Hey, Paul Smith. How's everybody doing? Hey, Richard Prexis. How's everybody doing tonight? So it is quite a world that we are living in. Russia is likely about 21, maybe 22 days away from hitting 1 million people lost in this conflict. That is KIAWIA. Hi, Eli. Hi, Nightshade. 3 weeks. We're just about, if it doesn't happen within 3 weeks, it's going to happen before 4 weeks, definitely, at the current pace. The math is undeniable. Though the average mean loss is down for May. It's the lowest we've seen in 6 months. Not that I believe that there is no ceasefire in place, but it does seem that the pace of Russian offense is slowing. Now, that is likely because the Russians are getting ready for the summer offensive. There is evidence from the commander of the Ukrainian armed forces in the Sumy region, who made an announcement today that there are troops massing on the Sumy border. And there are, in fact, 54,000 people under mandatory evacuation order from Sumy right now, in advance of what we think could be an orc horde pouring over the Sumy border to destroy yet another Ukrainian city and unalive everybody in it. So we've got another internal refugee crisis on our hands here. Make no mistake about it. You got to move 54,000 people in a country where infrastructure has been damaged through 11 years of war. Because we know the Donbass war started in 2014. Now, this question of Sumy and what's happening in Sumy, it is mind-boggling. Now, this question of Sumy and what's happening in Sumy, it is mind-boggling to me. The deluded nature of Russian officials. The boom booms are constant, Eli, on both sides, with the Russians having just targeted a civilian bus in Sumy, right? So just a civilian bus, not military people. A family of 5, a mother, a father, and 3 children were unalived in that strike, along with 4 others. Housekeepers, teachers, stonemasons on their way to work, going about their daily lives. Don't tell me to take it easy. You're not welcome here with that attitude. Now, hey, Samso. Oh, Samso's here. Samso, Jax, Ted Greenbow, Scully, Suzanne, and our sponsor tonight, Joshua Lee, are all first-time sponsors of the live. And I really want to thank them for stepping up, and I encourage you to follow their example and sponsor a live. PayPal is in the description. Okay, now, look it. You've got the Russians blowing up buses in the middle of the day, unaliving and targeting civilians. Meanwhile, You got the Ukrainians targeting the forces massing against them, right? There aren't two sides to this conflict. I don't know how much clearer the distinction between these two groups could be. One is run by a genocidal lunatic desperate to rewrite history in favor of himself and conquer the world and make everybody poor in the process so that only he and his billionaire buddies have any money. And then you've got the Ukrainians fighting for their own right to sovereignty, their own right to decide their own futures, their own rights to make their own mistakes in the world, like real people, rather than like the sheeple puppets of the Putin regime that make up the rank and file of the Russian population. That is the distinction here. Now, this delusion, the Russian officials are so deluded that the acting governor of Kursk, in a governor's meeting with Putin, asked the question, how much of Sumy, Mr. President, do you think we should take? So in a live town hall with probably not the Putin, the real Putin, but a doppelganger Putin, that was held this week, this acting governor of the Kursk region asked how much of Sumy how much of the neighboring oblast of a sovereign nation should we conquer and keep for ourselves? And there are idiots, especially tangerine ones in the White House, who believe that Putin is working toward peace. This is such nonsense. He is right now, he just bought, what he did was he bought himself 2 months' time by lying to Trump and the world and saying that he's ready to sign a memoranda to work toward peace. This is nonsense. There is no memoranda, there is no ceasefire, there's nothing except troops massing on the border getting ready for the summer offensive and Russian drones constantly raining terror down on the civilian population. That's the reality of life here in Ukraine. The Russians are full of shit. Now look at Trump for months has been screaming into Truth Social. If Russia doesn't come to the table, I will impose heavy sanctions. I will impose heavy sanctions. And just when he got everybody on board and all the Europeans were saying the same thing, he pulls the rug out from under them all and says, oh, Putin doesn't want a ceasefire. He wants to negotiate in Istanbul. Ukraine should go there. And now after Istanbul, Trump is saying, I don't want to impose sanctions because that will keep Russia from coming to the negotiating table and talking. Marco Rubio, in his testimony before Congress this week, put it this way. The president believes that threatening sanctions will only stop the Russians from talking. This is the position. So Trump has completely reversed his position on sanctions for Russia if they don't invoke a ceasefire. Now, that's the bad news, right, from this testimony of Rubio's. He also said the U.S. hasn't decided on new weapons, but has not stopped delivery of those promised. Now, that's good news, right? According to former Defense Secretary Ben Wallace of the UK, he believes that if the U.S. does not block European resale of U.S. weapons to Ukraine, the UK and Europe can provide the necessary intelligence and weapons to Ukraine if the U.S. won't. Now, the good news, right, is that it seems as though Marco Rubio is saying we're not going to block weapons to Ukraine. That's good news. But out of the other side of his mouth, He's saying we're not going to put sanctions on Russia, and he refused to answer the question, is Vladimir Putin a war criminal? Saying that that kind of language only alienates the Russians from the negotiating table, and our primary goal is to stop the bloodshed in Ukraine. Michael, that's a great question, and I don't have a good answer for you on that. Michael's question is, do we know what has not been delivered by the U.S.? I know we haven't delivered all the Patriot systems we promised. That's for sure. Beyond that, I don't know. Remember, Congress had approved $61 billion for Ukraine. And out of that allocation, the Ukrainians think that they've got about, I want to say 30, I think the last number I saw was 35 billion of that. So there's still lots of weapons in the pipeline. And the really good news with that is we're hearing from the Ukrainians that they currently have in stock a year's worth of artillery shells, firing off about 60,000 shells a month. They have about a year's worth in stock. They are the most stocked on artillery shells that they have ever been in this war. Conversely, we saw the Ukrainians just blow up a year's worth of Russian artillery shells. And the Russians are firing off 100,000 shells a month. That kind of asymmetric warfare on the part of the Ukrainians, damn, I look cool like that. That's awesome. But that kind of asymmetric warfare by the Ukrainians, it's what's keeping them in this fight. And it makes clear to me what we all need to be doing, and that's getting the weapons into the hands of the Ukrainians because they will use them effectively. I don't think there's any doubt about that. Now, again, Rubio refused to call Putin a war criminal. This is in line with other pro-Kremlin propaganda that the White House is pushing, such as the U.S. has opposed language in an upcoming statement from the G7 that would refer to Putin's invasion as illegal. They object to the idea that the invasion should be termed what it is, an illegal invasion of a sovereign country without UN Security Council validation. It's merely an act of imperial aggression. That's what the Ukrainians are living through. The other thing that the U.S. does not want included in this document is that the G7 would continue to support Ukraine, which is very worrying. It's very worrying that they won't even have the language continued support for Ukraine in a statement from the G7. Very disturbing. So the long and the short of it is, I think, Trump walked back, right? He acts such a strong guy, such a tough guy. If Russia doesn't come to the table, there's going to be bone-crushing sanctions. Oh, Russia doesn't want to come to the table? Okay, no sanctions. Weak. Eroding all of the world's confidence in the U.S. So Trump has pulled the rug out from under our European allies. He increasingly looks like he is trying to distance himself from Ukraine and the situation here because it didn't wrap itself up into and present itself a Nobel Peace Prize wrapped in a gold-plated ribbon for him. It's too much effort for that. That's the thing about these far-right fanatics. They absolutely have neither the patience nor the intellectual capacity to do the actual hard work of trying to build a future, trying to find a way together, figuring out how do we build the just city, the hard work of what it means for human beings to live together and pursue the hard things like science, space exploration, medicine, education. They don't have the capacity for it. They propose simple, easy to understand answers to complex dilemmas that are invariably wrong and create far more problems than they ever solve. And we have handed the reins of the free world to these incompetent assholes. It's insanity. Absolute insanity. Hello, Finland. Pedro the Amigo, are you in Finland today? Are you usually in Finland? I didn't think that was the case. Anyway. Now, there's a lot of talk. I see we have some trolls here tonight. And one of the things that the trolls often say is that the sanctions don't mean anything to Russia. Russia's stronger with the sanctions. Oh, really? I don't know why, Pedro. I didn't get that. Oh, nothing worse than being stuck in South Jersey. Here, this guy is saying the sanctions don't mean anything to Russia. The sanctions don't mean anything to Russia, right? Sanctions make Russia stronger. Russia dependent on itself now. No, Russia's sucking at the teat of China is what's going on. Absolutely desperate for the Chinese to bail them out. So sanctions are working, right? And here's the evidence, James. Now, look, I'm not saying that the sanctions are a panacea or that they work in all cases. They don't, right? They don't. We've seen sanctions failures, but they're working in many, many ways. It's slow going, I know. But one of the things that we saw come out of the sanctions today, TASS, the Russian newspaper, is reporting that the AWACS 100 program, that's Russia's program to build new radar command planes, right? AWACS, the ones with the big round radar dish on the top that can see over the horizon and give you all kinds of good data, targets, solutions, that kind of thing. No. The Russians' old AN-50 program, dead, right? They're not doing that. So they were trying to build this new generation of 100s, AWAC 100s. The program has been shut down. Now, TASS didn't say that it's because of sanctions. TASS didn't say that it's because of the government is running out of money. TASS didn't say that it's because the vital and intelligence components that one requires are not made in Russia, that you have to buy them from other countries, right? Because Russia doesn't fucking make anything. TASS didn't say any of that. But you can be sure that's why. Now, the money thing might also be the case. Because God knows the Sovereign Wealth Fund is running out of cash and gold fast. The Russians had, I want to say, 700 tons. I believe they had 700 metric tons of gold in stock at the start of the war, which was up from their usual level of about 500 tons. So they normally kept about 500 tons of gold on hand, right? And that's considered cash. Gold is considered cash. Before the war, they built that reserve up to 700 tons. It's a lot of fucking gold, right? How much they got left? Just what they put away before the war. 200 tons. The entire normal reserve, the 500 tons of gold, is gone. Gone. Likely most of it gone to Iran because we know that they were paying the Iranians in gold for the Shaheeds. Now, I think a lot of the gold that went to Iran came direct from Africa. Didn't come out of the sovereign wealth fund. But no matter how you slice it, the Russians are down 500 metric tons of gold. And then the actual remaining cash value, I want to say it's all together with the gold, they're down to about 34 billion USD in the sovereign wealth fund, down from over 200 billion. So the Russians are definitely running out of cash. And not only have they spent all that cash, they've accumulated a lot of debt. This is a recipe for economic disaster. Now, when that will come, we don't know. The falling price of oil should help. Hey, Eric. What else is going on? There was a large... So the Ukrainians have stopped playing ceasefire, and they are striking Russian targets again. The Russian MOD has claimed today that they shot down 159 drones over the country, over regions like Voronezh, Crimea, Moscow region saw 3, Kursk, Bryansk, Belgorod, Rostov-on-Don, 53 alone over Oriel. Now, in Oriel Oblast, the Volkov semiconductor plant was hit. This is a plant that produces components for Sukhoi jets and Iskander missiles. That plant is currently out of commission for the foreseeable future, after having been hit by no fewer than 10 Ukrainian drones. A number of Russian Telegram channels have published a video of the strike on the plant. There are at least 10 successful hits by Ukrainian drones. That plant is going to have a hard time recovering. Strikes were also recorded in Crimea, in Bryansk, in Belgorod, in Kursk, and in Rostov. Now, in Bryansk, now think about this with me. Along the Ukrainian border, right, you have Belgorod, Kursk, and Bryansk. Belgorod, Kursk, and Bryansk. Right now, the Ukrainians are holding territory in Belgorod. They are holding territory in Kursk. There are now rumors. Now, I have to stress to everybody, I mean, everybody knows, right, that a lot of what we talk about, it's tough to confirm, and I do my best to confirm it. This information is unconfirmed by any sources in Kyiv. It all comes from the Russians. So the Russian governor of Bryansk told the people of his state, his oblast today, that the roadblocks law enforcement are putting up are not because of Ukrainian soldiers on the territory of Bryansk, okay? The roadblocks, the evacuation orders, it's not because of Ukrainian military. It's merely preventive measures that law enforcement is taking. Now, the governor failed to say what they were trying to prevent. I want to stress that. So in this announcement from the governor's office in Bryansk, we have an acknowledgement that roadblocks are going up, areas are being evacuated, but it's definitely not because of the Ukrainians. So that definitely lends more, the fact that the governor's denying it, lends more weight to the Russian Millblogger Telegram channels that are saying that there's a gunfight happening inside of Bryansk Oblast now. Now, maybe this is just a cross-border raid, right? Maybe the Freedom of Russia Legion is just going after, say, communication services. because we also have reports that the internet is out in much of southern Bryansk. Why would the internet be out? Well, if the Ukrainians were invading Bryansk, they might take it out so that people couldn't, law enforcement couldn't coordinate, or rather defense units couldn't coordinate communications. Maybe that's why they would take it out. Or given the police state nature of the Russian Federation, it could have been shut down by the governor, who is also trying to prevent panic by saying that the roadblocks and evacuation orders are not because of Ukraine, but as simply a preventive measure. Again, against what he does not say, which I think is very telling. So even though I don't know for sure, and we don't have confirmation from the Ukrainian armed forces that Ukraine has invaded yet another oblast of the Russian Federation, it sure fucking looks like the Ukrainians have invaded a third oblast of the Russian Federation. Now you can say to yourself, why would they do this? This sounds insane. You just said they're evacuating their own people from Sumy because the Russians have 62,000 troops on the border, massed and ready to invade. Why would they invade a third oblast of Russia? Maybe to pin the Russians in Russia. If the Russians are threatening to invade, and you create yet another embarrassing incursion into a third Russian oblast, maybe those troops don't get sent into Ukraine. Maybe they stay in Russia. Now, Syrskyi's already said that the purpose of the Belgorod incursion is precisely that. Could they simply be using the same process to try to hold off, stave off, discourage the Russians from coming into Sumy, saving another Ukrainian town, maybe helping to prevent, well, we're already in a refugee crisis. 54,000 Ukrainians are on the move, getting out of Sumy right now. So we don't know, right? I want to be very clear. The fog of war, much of what I've just said about the incursion into Bryansk is speculation. But we will watch very carefully what develops there over the next few days. Simon Templar, you're such a nice guy, right? Like, look at what Simon says. Lavrov said that they only strike at military targets. What is Trump's answer to that bullshit? Trump doesn't care, Simon. It's so nice. It's naive of you to think that Trump would care. Trump does not care. Trump deported a 4-year-old American citizen with cancer. A 4-year-old baby with cancer, an American citizen, because she made the mistake of having parents who weren't citizens. In violation of all of our law and constitutional rights to due process. So do you think for 1 second that Donald Trump cares about Ukrainian civilians? No, he only cares that the ongoing murder of Ukrainian civilians is keeping him from making a lot of money off of Russia. A lot of money off of Russia. Lenin? Okay. Lenin corrects me and says that the dad was a citizen. I did not know that. And somebody else is reiterating that. Interesting. Just following orders is unacceptable, Edward's dilemma. I mean, World War II and the German regime, the Nuremberg trials taught us all that those words, refuse illegal orders or accept only legal orders. Freeze is supposed to free. Americans of conscience and morals from following these orders. The reality is that the people that do these jobs are sadists by nature. They are sadists, they are abusers, they are the worst kind of people. The people that seek out these jobs should not have them, which is the paradox of trying to fill these jobs. No sirens here, Nightshade. No sirens here. I'm not sure what you heard. I don't know. Exactly, Edwards. Right? It's exactly right. You know, Americans are supposed to have that freedom of conscience to refuse an illegal order. And you'll notice that ICE is not the military. ICE is like a paramilitary fascist organization inside of the US government. That's what it is. Michael, I'm sorry, I didn't look at the air raid map. I don't know if Odessa is under attack right now or not. I'm as safe as anybody in this country. Okay, anyway. What else we got here? So again, rumors of an incursion there. But given the governor's statements, I think that's what's going on. We talked about Trump backing down, right? About imposing sanctions. In the Pokrovsk direction, the analysts that I listen to seem to think that the Sumy incursion might be a distraction. It might be real. It might be a distraction. We're not clear. But what everybody seems to agree on is that the real summer push, the real Russian summer offensive, is going to come in Pokrovsk. And so the Ukrainians have been very carefully degrading the Russian ability to prosecute an offensive there by targeting ammo dumps, supply lines, fuel depots, etc., trying to starve off the Russian forces in that emergent salient southwest of Pokrovsk. But we think that now remember, it's a year ago we were saying that Pokrovsk is going to fall in a few weeks. It's a year ago, and Pokrovsk is still in Ukrainian hands. The meat grinder of Pokrovsk makes Bakhmut look like a tea party. I mean, it's a nightmare. It's a nightmare. There are drone operators in the Pokrovsk direction who now have confirmed 1,000 kills. One man with drones, video confirmation of each kill. He's racked up 1,000 enemy. That's the asymmetric nature of this warfare, right? The Ukrainians are fighting smart. The Russians are fighting stupid. And that's why they are 3 weeks away from losing 1 million men. Okay. That's it for the top line news, guys. We can go to Q&A if anybody has any questions about anything. Let me thank the sponsor of tonight's live, Joshua Lee. I want to thank all of the new sponsors who have stepped up in the last week to sponsor a live. I can't do it without you guys. So every new person that joins the Patreon or comes into the fold or sponsors a live is a gift. And tonight it's Joshua Lee. Last night, our old friends, Cynthia and Tony. And then last week, we had Scully and Jax and Ted Green now. And coming up will be Suzanne. So from New Zealand, a Kiwi. So if anybody wants to sponsor lives, PayPal's in the description. Cannot do it without you. Or join the Patreon. Where there's going to be some very interesting stuff coming out on page. At least I hope so. I hope you find it as interesting as I do. But I think I may have finally had some real insight into how we got here. Maybe. I don't know. You'll tell me. Anyway, how long? Hey, it has been a long time. Are you still in Ukraine? I don't recognize your account. I am still in Ukraine, yes. Nicola Jones, how you doing? Any news on the troop buildup on the borders of NATO? So, I've read every single intelligence summary put out by the Finnish intelligence agencies regarding the buildup along the Finnish border. And there is no mention of troops. Only tent encampments for housing as many as 2,000 troops. Only sheds for housing tanks, but there are no tanks. Only repairs to a runway and the presence of helicopters there. Now, it's my opinion that these are charades. They're just cardboard, not really cardboard cutouts. They're really sheds. They're really tents. They're really helicopters. But I am hopeful that some Finnish reconnaissance drone, say, flies over to that airport where they've put the helicopters and gets some close-up pictures of those helicopters. I'd like to know if they are riddled with little holes from tungsten balls, right? Damaged helicopters that will never fly again, that are just being put there as a show of force, as a distraction, to try to get the Finns to stop spending money in Ukraine and start spending money on their own border defense. I believe that's what it is. I think it's all just smoke and mirrors. Now, we'll see. Lots of people are telling me I'm wrong. And God knows I'm wrong all the time. Just ask my ex-wife. Eli, what guys say are lies. Reality, Russia will push him to sue me. Anything he say is opposite of truth. Anything I say is opposite of truth. Well, what Alexei just said is the truth. You got to be kidding me, pal. I never said that the Russians wouldn't pour in to sue me. I said that valiant Ukrainian defenders who stand against the evil that is the Russian Federation are literally laying down their lives right now on Russian territory to keep it from happening. That's what I fucking said. Just to be clear. How much does the people in Ukraine feel like they have been abandoned by America? Very much, Altunaval. Very, very much. Now, there's a diversity of opinion on this. There are some Ukrainians who really believe in Donald Trump. They think he's playing some kind of 4D chess, just like the maggots in the U.S. I think you and I know this is nonsense, that he is a creature of the Kremlin, that he is bought and paid for by Vladimir Putin. And everything he does will be in Russia's best interest. And increasingly, I think Ukrainians are aware of that too. So, well, let me rephrase this, because you know what? I would say that the Ukrainians I talk to, the ones I know, at least when talking to me, don't feel betrayed by the United States. They feel betrayed by Donald Trump. And that is a distinction. That is a distinction. Oh, tough as heck. Thanks, Scott. I did, Jax. Soros sponsored? Jesus Christ, what I wouldn't give to be Soros sponsored. Hey, George, where's my fucking check? Maybe I can stop hitting up Cynthia for grocery money once in a while, huh? Ugh. Yeah, no, seriously, I did that. I had to do that this week. So if anybody can sponsor a live, PayPal's in the description, or join the Patreon. I'm so sorry for that. Doesn't have the guts to fight, right? Absolutely. I don't know what that means. No, if you, the rest of the free world supports Ukraine. God, I hope so. Most Americans stand with Ukraine. I absolutely believe that. I absolutely believe that most American, and more than one person saying that. That's nice to see. I think that is generally true. Now, Rowdy says something interesting here. Look at what he says, or she says. I don't know. They say Ukraine should have kept their nukes. There are a lot of people saying that these days, Rowdy. You are not alone, pal. A lot of people are saying that the big mistake Ukraine made was they gave up their nukes back in 1994, and if they had just kept them, they'd be able to defend themselves from Russia. Russia would never have invaded. And I think you're right that Russia would never have invaded. But I think you're wrong about the reason. If Ukraine had kept their nukes, Russia would never have let them go. Russia kept their thumb on Ukraine for multiple presidential administrations here. It wasn't until 2014 when the Ukrainian people had an election stolen from them, so obviously stolen that it couldn't be denied, in favor of a pro-Russian candidate, that they took to the streets en masse and were shot down for it, at which point they burned shit down until the pro-Russian government fled the country. It is important to remember that history, because up until that time, Russia hadn't had to invade. They controlled the country from afar, the way that they control Lukashenko and Belarus. And very much they kept this country like Belarus. Very small army, no real weapons, took all the weapons back, kept them weak, defenseless, so that they could be controlled. Remember, the Ukrainian military, indeed modern Ukrainian consciousness and identity in the 21st century, has been forged in the crucible of this war beginning in 2014. And so when we think about the long historical relationship between Russia and Ukraine, I believe, and I don't know that there's a way to prove this, but based on what I've just said, it's my considered opinion that if Ukraine had kept their nukes, Russia would have never let them go. It would never have gotten to a point where Ukraine could pull away. Now, maybe I'm wrong about that. Nobody will ever know. We'll never really know the answer to that. But it's my opinion that is one possible future. Well, Gordon, I would not say that I understand Ukraine, no. I've been living here now for 2.5 years. And I came here to learn exactly that. And the nature of our enemy, our common enemy, the Russians. I came to learn about that from the Ukrainians. So to say, do I understand Ukraine? I can't say that I do. I just had a terrible cultural misunderstanding with some dear people who I think highly of that pretty much trashed our working relationship, and it was mostly my fault. I want to be clear about that. And it was a purely cultural misunderstanding because it is different. Things are different here. The culture is different. And so I wouldn't claim to understand that culture. Same with the Russians. But I feel more today I have a far greater understanding and know more about what I don't know than I did when I came here. Yeah, Steve. Steve McStevens. Exactly. If Ukraine wanted nukes, they could build them. All of the mines, resources necessary for such a thing exist in Ukraine or could be acquired. I don't think they have a centrifuge for refining uranium 235 to plutonium. I don't think they have that piece of equipment. But that's not to say they couldn't build it or buy one. You know, I hear there's an old one from Iraq available for sale. Opinion warning. Right, exactly, Trav. Right. I try to be clear when I'm talking about my own thoughts versus the facts that we understand the best we understand them. Thanks, Di. Oh, look at that. It's another 100,000 likes night. Wow, neato. Maggie May. Miss Maggie May, how you doing? Hey, Birdie. Dolphin Communications. There's a fascinating subject, boy. Is Russia still able to refine uranium, or is it old USSR stuff? No, Bobby. Russia is one of the largest refiners of uranium in the world. In point of fact, the United States used to buy, I want to say it was 18% of what we needed annually for nuclear power and for medical, radiological medicine. I think we used to get 18 before the war. I think we got 18% of our uranium from Russia, but that is now zero because we sanctioned it and made it illegal to buy Russian uranium. So we're out of the market for that. Those same kind of sanctions are why half the Russian coal mines are about to close. They're facing huge bankruptcies. I want to say there's 524 active coal mines inside Russia, and fully half of them are ready to collapse. They will likely all declare, 200 some odd of them will declare bankruptcy in this calendar year. What is the linchpin holding Russia together? The same linchpin that holds every autocracy together. Fear and suffering. Fear and suffering. Right now, the great linchpin that holds the Russian social consciousness together is the years of war propaganda, that this war is existential, that it is a war against the entire West, that it is a war that Russia must win. If Putin concedes now, the cognitive dissonance between what the Russian public has been told to believe and the reality of the outcome will be so great that it will likely crack the very fabric of Russian society, which is already tearing at the seams. So Putin is stuck. He must win, or they will literally tear him apart. Lots of empty lampposts around Red Square to pick from. Altered Carbon is talking about an old story on 60 Minutes about the suitcase nukes. Now, I don't believe that it was 100. First, Altered Carbon, I do not believe that it was 100. I believe it was 10. I don't believe that the USSR ever made 100. Now, I could be wrong about that. The next question is, they're suitcase nukes. What the fuck do you mean a suitcase nuke? It's exactly what it sounds like, kids. It's exactly what you think it is. It is a small nuclear device that fits in a suitcase. I don't think they were quite carry-on size. They were a little bigger than that, if I'm not mistaken. And as many as 10 of them, if I'm not mistaken, maybe Altered Carbon is right. Maybe I've moved a decimal place, or maybe you have. 10 of them went missing at the end of the Soviet Union's life. And they were likely sold on the open market, right, as loose nukes. Now, you may be thinking to yourself, God, he's telling this story awful calm. Why is he so fucking calm? That doesn't make sense. We should be freaking out. No, you should not be freaking out, kids. Here's why you should not be freaking out. The suitcase nukes were extraordinarily unstable. Because of their size, if I'm not mistaken, they were limited to 0.2 grams of tritium as the fissile trigger. Maybe 0.4. It might have been 0.4. But the fact is, given the half-life of tritium, they needed a refresh every year. Every year. And so the maintenance required to keep them functional at critical mass makes it entirely unlikely that any of them are still in any way functional. It's far more likely that they were not purchased for the purposes of terrorism. They were purchased for the technology and the plutonium inside of them, and other rare kind of elements you couldn't get anywhere else, right? So I don't have any concerns about the suitcase nukes. If they were ever going to come up, they would have come up in the last 30 years. There's just the odds that they are functional in any way today are near zero. Yeah, the Budapest Memoranda is commonly misunderstood. I do encourage everybody to read it. It's not long. It's like 2 pages. When you get past the whereases and war of fours and stuff. And the actual commitments are very vague and are in fact assurances, not guarantees, which in diplomatic language means fuck all. Is Putrid threatening Oreshniks tonight? He's threatening Oreshniks every day. Nice, Kath. Russia is, in fact, selling off properties to pay its debt, Nightshade. Now, this is not new news. This news came out, maybe 10 months ago, maybe a year now, that Russia was selling off a number of large properties in and around Moscow and Petersburg that belonged to the government in an effort to reduce costs and maintenance and to generate a little cash. I don't know how that fire sale went, but it was something like, I want to say over 200 state offices. Trump probably bought them at a bargain because he knows a good deal. How about a recap of the ICBM test? Oh, Bobby, you know what? I'm really glad you brought that up. Because, Travis just said opinion, warning, right? And it's a good point to make, and I try to make it all the time. What is a fact? What is my opinion? And I got a fact wrong about the ICBM test on Sunday. I believed, and I don't know how I made this mistake, but I thought the Russians had announced that test. I was looking at it all over today. It does not appear that they did. Then I thought, wait, maybe Our Defense Department put out a statement that they had been informed by the Russians that an ICBM silo would be opening and a test launch would be happening at this date, at this time. And so I went back through the Pentagon press releases, and there's nothing there either. So I believe that the whole origin story of the ICBM test launch on Sunday was the Ukrainian outlet Defense Express. So I apologize that I said it was Russia that told us about that. That appears to be incorrect. Defense Express generally is a source of good information. I'm unclear who their source was not cited when I looked at the article. But they see other than intelligence officials inside of the Ukrainian government. Ukraine has a good reason to put out a story that's not true about the Russians and makes the Russians look bad. At the same time, the Ukrainians don't have to put out stories that make the Russians look bad. The Russians generate those stories themselves quite enough, in my experience. So, on the subject of the ICBM launch that was scheduled for Sunday, no such launch happened. That much is clear. Whether or not it was actually scheduled, I have to say we only have one source and it is unconfirmed. Okay. So guys, it's just about 1 a.m. here. Again, I want to thank Joshua Lee and all the new people who stepped up and sponsored a live. If you can be one of those people, you can be our sponsor tomorrow night. PayPal's in the description. Patreon's in the description too. Join the Patreon. You can get yourself a free subscriber account, and anything that gets published over there, you'll have access to first, if not exclusively. I'm Peter Alexievich. Big thanks to Joshua Lee and the other new sponsors. Thanks to Lars, who has the Discord server, Nightshade, who has the Peter's Peeps groups on the Book of Faces, and to Jay and Travis, the moderators tonight. Thanks, Altered Carbon. That's a good question about the suitcase nukes, man. Thank you. Thanks, Bernard. Thanks, Laddie. Thanks, Manda Bear. Thanks, Nicola. All right, kids. I'll see you soon. Take care.